You are logged on to the www.thepapare.com, Sri Lanka's #1 sports hub, and it has been 3 months since the FINA, or rather the governing body for swimming in the international sphere suspended the Sri Lankan Aquatics Union, and we are here at the Sri Lanka Aquatics Union with the FINA representative for the country, Mr. Akry Ameen, the interim secretary for FINA, for the FINA appointed committee for Sri Lanka. Pleasure to have you with us in this show, Mr. Akry, to find out what really went wrong with the Sri Lanka Aquatics Union and how have our swimmers performed so far in these upcoming international tournaments. So to start off proceedings, Mr. Akry, can you tell us about the recent achievements at the World Championships in Kazan and what controversies or problems we faced at Kazan initially?
Well, as you know, March was the time that we were supposed to have elections, and then it got deferred by the minister. And in the run-up, when the new government was appointed, also we questioned as to when this agreement that they had agreed with the IOC to revise our sports regulations would be completed, and we were told it will be done in about 1 to 2 months. However, that didn't happen, and then in May, the interim the people who were contesting the present incumbent committee had to have an election, and they, despite FINA's directives, they went and had the election, and that's how this suspension came about, to make a long story short. So in this kind of a scenario, FINA as an international body and many other international sports bodies has a system of making the athletes take part independently. So Kazan was the culmination of that, where we saw the suspended member federation Sri Lanka taking part as the FINA independent athletes, and so we had 4 athletes taking part. The highlight of this and the sad part of it was that this was the year that for the first time we were taking part as not all of our athletes were universal athletes, but one had actually qualified. And it should have been an achievement to highlight, but instead it was an achievement we had to mourn about, because we were not representing Sri Lanka. And but the thing is that at the environment at the championships, they are more encouraging, and FINA was looking at how to develop the developing countries. So Matthew Abesing, who is the closest on qualifying time so far for the Olympic qualification, along with some of the other athletes from some other nations, was identified, and FINA hopes to give them some kind of funding to assist them to try and qualify before next May, so that they can get out of this universality and move into qualifications for Rio. Of course, there is a little bit of challenges that we have to face, and we will try to get over those. So I guess that is the kind of end result of this. Sadly, up to 2013, there were about 4 international federations under suspension. All of them have sorted their problems out. This year at Kazan, we were the only federation under suspension participating.
So since Sri Lanka has fallen through this suspension, where do you see the path ahead where Sri Lanka can once again be a full member nation in the FINA membership status?
Well, FINA very clearly gave 2 options to the government: either that they postpone the elections until the sports law is revised, or to have an election without applying the conditions that are currently there in the sports law. And those 2 are very clear options. So either the ministry has to take a very strong decision to say that they would call off the election that was declared as legal by them, and allow us to continue until the law can be changed, or have fresh elections without any of the government provisions being applied on us. If that's the case, the very next day the suspension will be lifted.
So according to Mr. Akry, the suspension will soon be lifted if the ministry and the government takes necessary measures to rectify this error. And moving on, as Mr. Akry mentioned, there have been several swimmers who have been given scholarships or other funding to carry out their training activities for Rio 2016. So, Mr. Akry, can you tell us about few swimmers who have already got training opportunities at the FINA training centers?
Okay. Well, it is a brand new program that FINA launched this year. Previously, it was only funding through the Olympic Solidarity in terms of cash. But this year, the two athletes, namely Chirantha De Silva and Kimiko Rahim, they got in on the program and they're right now training at a fully fledged facility in Thanyapura, Thailand, under a Olympic medalist producing coach, Mr. Miguel. And the program is successful. Obviously, it's the start, so we couldn't expect a higher achievement of the athletes at Kazan because it was just 1.5 months since they started this program. And it is a new experiment for FINA, and so when it started, we did have some teething issues like visas with the Thailand government and things like that. So it's a learning curve, and people have to accept that it is a positive step in the correct direction, and athletes have to take on. So I'm happy that the athletes are happy and training hard, and I hope that we will see a product out of that and we get out of the universality places into the qualification regime.
Speaking of swimmers, I think Sri Lanka has produced a number of swimmers who have gone to the world stage. Some swimmers like Mayumi Rahim, Heshan Nambu. Can you tell us a bit into the past how Sri Lankan swimmers dominated the swimming sphere to some extent?
Dominance has mainly been in Sri Lanka. I wouldn't say internationally, but over the years that is changing. Even the peace efforts has contributed very well, and I have a lot of swimmers who are domiciled in other countries calling and saying how they can come and take part at our nationals because they are Sri Lankan nationals. But of course, the revolution, I would say, happened since 2006 South Asian Games, where Andrew Abesinga got some medals, Mayumi got some medals, and then subsequently we have had athletes. Heshan Unambo is currently training on his own in the university in USA, and so he's got to balance his studies as well. So he was not available for the World Championships. I don't know of his performance in the last 6 months. But we have had some other young athletes coming into the field in the form of the sisters of Mayumi Rahim, Machiko Rahim and Kimiko Rahim. Machiko is just about a week since she left for training in the US to attend universities as well. Matthew Abesinga is our main star at the moment, and he is deciding to defer his university for 1 more year so that he can focus on training for Olympic qualification, and he's doing it here. So that's also a credible achievement to say that we can try and do something over here with these performances. So swimming has improved vastly since 2006. Somewhere around 2010, we were around close upon 600 FINA points, the best swimmer. Today, the best swimmer is about 720 FINA points. If I were to put this in a very understandable term, 100 meters freestyle, which is the signature event, in 2010, the best time was around 54 something, and now the best time is at 51 something, so almost a second a year kind of improvement. So that speaks a lot for the local environment.
So speaking of all the swimmers, there are people in the backstage that are doing all the work, doing all the hard works and the efforts. So we'd like to speak about the Sri Lanka Aquatic Association and their efforts in bringing these swimmers to the world stage.
Well, that's a big story in itself, because the achievement of the swimmers, I would give it to the coaches. I have to say that it was their efforts and also the parents, because funding has always been very limited. The efforts of the association, yes, the support of my president and the rest of the crew, and of course, since I became general secretary, or the time that I've been assistant secretary, I've been working almost full time here in an entirely voluntary capacity. So it's that sacrifice that we have put in because we want to see a proper facility. So we are actually delivering the work of a fully fledged association in other countries with just 3 paid employees, one voluntary employee. And it has been challenging in all fronts. The challenges starting with financial and then the know-how, the resources, etc. Because not everyone is willing to commit. And luckily, the way I work, I can commit, but I'm not too sure everyone can do that. And internationally, what has been chosen is that there is a model called called, it's a policy model that has been adopted by many international associations, where the policy is by the association board, and there are full-time employees to do the rest of the work. Unfortunately, we cannot implement that here because of the funding. So we are in a never-ending spiral which we cannot get out. So we have to find out ways of kicking ourselves out of the spiral to do this, because we have issues with bureaucracy, we have issues with culture of the sport, knowledge of the parents, educational challenges, financial challenges, and also the bureaucracy of the ministry, because, okay, if we do understand that they cannot be fully fledged to give us all the funds we need, but then at least remove the bureaucratic hurdles so that we can, because we are volunteers, we cannot be chasing, for example, to get a team approved, it takes us almost 1.5 months and about 14-15 letters. We cannot do that. And also, like if you take the Ministry of Education, we right now have a junior team in Singapore at the World Junior Championships, and we have to find funds of 300,000 rupees just to send a teacher in charge as a lady chaperone, whereas the coaches are funding their own selves. So this is a kind of ridiculous situation. If that is the case, obviously that itself is a hurdle. So likewise, we have many areas. I could actually write a storybook on the challenges that we face and why we cannot get out of it. So unless we can kick some of these challenges out of this never-ending loop, we cannot improve any further. We've done our best right now. We are performing maximum.
Mr. Akry, since you are a veteran in the sport or the sports administration, can you tell us what possibly can Sri Lanka rectify in order to go on the right track, as you mentioned, the key to success, if I'm not mistaken?
Well, couple of things. One is on the side of education, and there again, I would suggest that our coaches start developing their knowledges in English, because we cannot be translating every single document for them. The internet is the world out there, and if they start thinking in terms of knowledge-driven coaching, I'm sure they can perform much more. We are trying to give them the best backing in terms of FINA. We had some successful coaching clinics last December and things like that. So with this suspension right now, all those are at a standstill. We want to try and improve on that. And then, of course, the children need to be able to learn to manage their education and challenges. If you take athletes like Matthew Abesinger, they've been training throughout their A-level exams. Not all children are willing to do that kind of commitment. Parents also have to figure out how to balance it. You cannot do 100% extracurricular activities. Swimming is a full-time sport. They train in morning and evening. So you need to be able to find the right balance. And then, of course, the ministry has to provide the support structure. I would request that the ministry not request us to provide the budgets, because we do not know how much they can give us. So they possibly have to start with giving us some kind of a budget to at least make sure that the association office can be run on a monthly basis. If that, then we can concentrate on other areas of finding funds. Right now, we are in this office space of 1,000 square feet, thanks to my president, who pays all the rent. So otherwise we cannot do anything. So funding is very restricted like that. Like even to bridge the air tickets until FINA reimburses us the cost, etc. Because we are a national association and the banks won't give us overdrafts, we have to take personal overdrafts to fund the interim. So these are some of the stories that no one hears about, and that's why I say I can write a storybook on how to run an association here in this scenario.
In this case, Mr. Akry, where do you see regional development in this on this sport? Rather, we see only Colombo and Kandy mainly dominating swimming, but then where do you see the other provinces like the north and the east coming into the swimming arena?
Well, like I said, initially there has to be some kind of basic funding for us to go, because right now we have barely funding to run our meets. Last year, for example, we ran the meets and we paid almost 2.1 million in terms of pool hire charges to Sugatdasa Stadium, and that's the national program, age group and senior. If we have to expend that kind of money to a government institution, how do you expect us to go out there? So we are trying to look out for sponsors, but in order to do the sponsors, the environment has to be supportive, and we need some stars. So we need the coaches to rally around to recognize that fact and not be taking petty differences. And they need to recognize that we need a few key athletes out there to promote the sport, and then we can take the development into those areas. Also, we need to do education to try and get out of the culture that coaching is not for people who did not do well in other spheres of life, but rather people who must believe that there is a scope in coaching. Right now, everyone seems to think that people who are not successful in getting other jobs coming into coaching. So we want to break out of that stigma so that we can get out. So these are some of the challenges we have to address if we are to go outstation. Right now, in some zones that we are Colombo, Kandy, and Ambalangoda, the south, we are fairly good. We know some sporadic programs happening in terms of learn to swim and developing in some other areas, but unfortunately we are stuck to help them because we have to manage our own selves for now, and hopefully some initial funding we can break out of that.
So on one final note, Mr. Akry, I think we've had some good prospective talents in the sport so far. So where do you see, I think Matthew Abisingha in his interview with ThePapare.com mentioned that he wanted to get an Olympic B-grade qualification so that he can go to Rio straight away. But then where do you see any other Olympic athletes or the athletes making it to Rio in the form of swimming?
Well, I have the two swimmers who are training on the FINA scholarship program. They are training full-time, no studies, morning till evening, so it's a hard session. And the level of input from being, morning training before school and training after school, here it's full-time. So that level of effort, hopefully we should see something. The other thing is commitment of the athletes, because most of our athletes are trying to do their best before they go to university and wash off from the sport. That cannot be. If we are to achieve, they need to look at staying longer. At least through university, they need to look at performing. And swimming is a sport. If you do well, if you get your times, even international universities, there is opportunity of scholarships if they work at it. They just have to do their research. And if someone is willing to go all that way, we are looking at trying to help them with research, etc.
It was a very good it was a pleasure talking to you, Mr. Akry. I think we have had quite a lot of information about swimming and aquatics and Sri Lanka's progress in the sport. So thank you so much for a valuable time, Mr. Akry, and speaking to our viewers on ThePapare.com. Over and out for ThePapare.com. This is Inshaf Kafoor, sharing the passion.